We had some interesting discussions last time about politics and toxic politics. A lot about the politics in the United States, but we also talked a little bit about the politics here. But yeah, so we got some comments.
Yeah, we had people responding.
Yeah.
To different perspectives. One of which was why is it Bobby always leading and taking lead?
Yeah, so we want to talk about it. Do you want me to read the comment and then you can maybe we can maybe address that? So this particular person commented, instead of reading replies on the cell phone where Bobby squints, and I admit that I do that sometimes.
Okay.
And actually I caught it in the last video. I think it was the last one. I went and I did something like this as I looked into the camera. So yeah, I do tend to squint. So yeah, where Bobby squints and hurts his eyes, in future videos, before you do them, print out on computer comments you want to read and highlight with marker or underline what you want to read on the printout because it's bad for the eyes. He goes on to say, I guess Paul also wants Honor to read replies or what's highlighted or underlined. Some viewers, like me, would like Paul to also read replies as well and give his view first. Don't always have Bobby first.
It's not that I cannot do some of this, what Bobby is doing, but then sometimes everyone is more comfortable doing, particular portions of the recording. And, where I feel more comfortable, I come in. Where I feel more comfortable, he comes in.
Generally, I tend to start it because I think that's something that we agreed from the start that I would do. It's not to say that Paul can't start out and lead. It's just that we agreed that I would be the one to kind of lead things, to introduce the topics and so forth. But a lot of times, even though I introduce the topics, Paul kind of takes ownership of the topic and has most of the discussion. So.
How about, sometimes let's try it out. Try this thing out,
Yeah, let's try it the reverse way. So
we shall try it some
maybe next time. We'll honor his request here.
Yeah.
And next time we'll let Paul go first. We're going to try to follow what a nerd suggested, and we're going to have you introduce. How about if we have you introduce the topic this time?
Yeah, so, okay. So this time we thought about following up on a few of our topics with cancel culture. Because I think at some point you talked about cancel culture.
Briefly,
Way briefly, because it just showed up. Because basically, if you're talking about topics in this kind of line, you'll talk about pretty much everything at some point. But then we want to actually explore this on a bigger stage, like give it more time. So yeah, Bobby, cancel culture.
Yes.
Is it the modern day mob justice?
Is it the modern? Say that again.
Would you call it the modern day mob justice?
Modern day mob justice, yes, and I might even call it the modern day social media mob justice, although it's not limited to social media. But yes, it's mob justice in the modern times.
And by mob justice, we mean, irrational or rash decision making as to how to punish people. And
because it can happen very quickly. It can happen in a day or two, where a person one day their life is fine, they get caught on video saying something, or something gets taken out of context, or it gets interpreted a certain way. Maybe they did legitimately say something bad, or maybe they didn't, but somebody interpreted it that way. And then within 24 to 48 hours, suddenly the mob's after them. They're attacking the company they work for, and the company, in order to deal with the pressure, has to get rid of that person and fire that person.
Yeah, so given what we've been discussing before, I think all our viewers would be expecting us to talk about the negatives of, cancel culture. But then, before we go to the obvious, that you expect from us, are there any positives that you would see
in cancel culture?
Yeah.
So, here's where the arguments kind of go.
Why do they promote it? Why is it a big deal? Why is it happening?
So I think what a lot of, in its original form, the attitude behind it is bringing consequences maybe to people who previously have not had consequences. And that's maybe where the origins of cancel culture come from. In the same way that woke agenda is rooted in something legitimate, it started out being concerned about issues of social injustice, specifically regard to race and gender. And then the other agendas began to jump on it, and they turned it into something else. They began to jump on that train. Originally, what I think cancel culture, before it was called cancel culture, the original motivation was to bring accountability to those who didn't have accountability in the past. So, for example, you could say racist things at one time in America and get away with it. You could say the N-word, for example, and get away with it. But then the day came when suddenly if you say the N-word, now suddenly you're going to find yourself...
Your life is going to be very difficult.
Yes, it's going to be very difficult. And so originally it started as something to bring accountability to people who previously had not had accountability. And so that's actually a good thing. But then what happened is it turned into this mob justice sort of thing, where now you're going to go after anybody who does not subscribe to the agendas that you want to promote, whether it's the transgender agendas or whatever, you know.
So would you say that in essence, would you say in essence that cancel culture is suffocating freedom of speech?
I think that what it does is it makes people afraid to say certain things that people won't say anymore. So there's a positive aspect to this. So for example, in the U.S., to see the kind of blatant racism that I saw back when I was younger. So I've been around for a few decades.
For a long time.
Yeah, for a long time. So if I look at how things were back in the 1970s and 1980s, people could openly say things. I mean, I would openly hear people say the N-word, for example. And
I like how you say N-word.
I don't want to say
Anyway, yeah.
Yeah. And there would be no consequences for it. And then I would even have people make rational justifications for it. One of the justifications I heard once, well, it's in the dictionary. And if you look it up in the dictionary, all it'll say is that the N-word is another word for a black person. And I remember arguing with this person and saying, no, I don't agree with that. I think if you open up the dictionary, it would say that it's a bad word. And I went to the dictionary and I was wrong. It didn't say that it was a bad word. And I'm kind of glad now that it won't water the word down now. But I think seeing how things have changed from that time where people could openly make racist remarks and get away with it. And I even think about the fact, okay, so you know, everybody watching this, I'm married to a Ugandan woman. So I'm married to a black woman, an African woman. Well, there was a time back in the 1980s when I briefly dated an African American woman. And I was harshly criticized by numerous people because they were telling me that I should not be dating somebody who was black. And I've seen how the culture has changed in America to, at one time, what I would receive open criticism for doing. Today, I haven't received any criticism on the American side for marrying an African woman. I've not received any.
And it's even subtle.
I haven't seen it yet. I mean, I've seen some subtle kind of things here in... Sharon and I have had some subtle things here in Uganda, where it's kind of the reverse way, where she gets criticized for marrying a Mzungu or a white man. You know, they say that you're marrying him for money, you know, you're just after him because he's white and he has money and all that. You know, those stereotypes. Even though I don't have as much money as people think I do, but that's neither here nor there. But I am retired, so I mean, I guess that's saying something. So I mean, I do provide, you know, some stability. But
yeah, you can provide.
Yeah, and then we received some criticisms on social media, which you've talked about before. I talked about some of that in some of the early videos. But I've seen how things have changed in America compared to how they were in the 70s and 80s. But maybe when I go back to the U.S. and I bring Sharon with me, maybe we'll see some more of those kind of things.
Of course you will.
Yeah. So,
you will.
But I don't see it as openly as it was decades ago, because it's not culturally acceptable to say those things anymore.
So in essence, cancel culture in that regard
is a positive thing. So, but the question is, in what way is it a good thing, and when does it stop being a good thing?
Okay. Yeah, so we've seen a few people cancelled. There is a guy, he was a billionaire, and within 2 days or something, he was now a millionaire because of a few statements that he made on on X or something. The Kanye West saga. You heard of it?
I was uncomfortable with what Kanye said.
Yeah, but then we're teaching. Basically, our gospel here is to teach people. Is for people to actually be, to accept people who talk things that are uncomfortable. Just because I've said something uncomfortable doesn't necessarily mean I should be cancelled. You can listen to me. We can discuss.
Right.
You can guide me if I'm wrong. Unless I think we go too far.
When cancel culture goes to the point where people start to use it to keep people from saying things that they don't want to hear or that make them uncomfortable or that keep people from challenging them, that's kind of what...
like what cancel... No, like that incident of Kanye West, because they talked about Israel and Hitler and etc. And then we're having this Gaza, Israel-Gaza fighting. And then you find that the public or the greater society is being guilt-tripped to not look at the bad Israel is doing because, oh my God, like I'll be cancelled. But then that's how it's been portrayed. Same with how a man cannot really go all out on a woman criticizing her because he will be called a misogynist, something like that. So we have these labels and we canceling people because of these extreme ideas that we are preaching. Let's say anti-Semitism, whatever, misandry, misogyny, racist. So we can't criticize black people, we can't criticize women, we can't criticize Jews, we can't criticize this. Like, where is the freedom of speech? And who holds these people accountable? People who are protected. Jews are protected. So who holds Jews accountable? Who holds women accountable? Who holds black people accountable when they go wrong?
Well, typically these groups that you mentioned have not had a voice in the past and have been marginalized in the past. And so they kind of feel like maybe they are counterbalancing some of those historical impacts by not allowing them to be criticized because they have been so criticized in the past. We have to confront the historic legacies that exist around sexism, racism, anti-Semitism, whatever kind of bigotry it is, we have to confront that. But is it appropriate to overcompensate for that and not allow any criticisms whatsoever?
So in our first video, I think it was our very first video where we talked about awake to wokeness, something like that. You said you spent, the greater part of your life worried about talking about some of these topics, and you just got the guts because you're semi-retired or something like that.
Yeah. But this didn't become a problem until maybe about the late 1990s is when I started to notice things shifting. Like prior to the 1990s,
you were comfortable.
I was comfortable because America still had a general, everybody kind of agreed in free speech and that you could say things even if they were offensive. But then things suddenly started to shift. I started to notice it in the late 1990s when I started to experience hostility towards some of the things that I believe that I had never experienced hostility towards before. And then after maybe 10 years of that growing, things maybe started to become a little bit more risky because then you started to see people actually having very real consequences, losing jobs and so forth. And then I started to have experiences of losing friendships. I don't think when the first time I lost a friendship was over a disagreement over what we believed. And it was basically over what the church's position should be on gay marriage, which I subscribe to, a traditional Christian view that marriage is between a man and a woman. And as a result of my saying this, this person didn't want to be my friend anymore. Could have been early 2000s, 2001, 2002 was probably, yeah. But a few years after, I started to notice the shift occurring. And then that happened to me a few more times, and then eventually you get to a point where you just don't want to say anything anymore.
So I would look at that period of over 20 years of, let's say, kind of a prison where you can't really be yourself. Would that be accurate to say that?
Yeah. I didn't necessarily put out an image or say that I believe things that I didn't. I just kept my mouth shut whenever the topics came up so that people didn't know one way or the other.
So yeah, but then what's the point? Is there any effect it has on a person? Let's say when I have different views, but then I put up a different image. Is there an effect on me, the person? Or is that something we need to actually talk about?
Yeah, I mean, the impact, I mean, I know the impact on me. I mean, because you feel like you're living in denial of yourself, and you feel like, and a lot of times with me, I felt like, because a lot of these things were rooted within my Christian faith, values that are rooted within my Christian beliefs. I'm fearing man over God because I didn't have the courage to stand up to say this is what I believe, because I was afraid of the consequences. I'm betraying my God, I'm betraying my faith. And that was, I think, very catastrophic on my spiritual kind of health and well-being, maybe. But, you know, that's my fault, because I should have been more courageous.